All right, I believe we can begin. Welcome everybody to the crew scheduling webinar from Rentman. I believe most of you, or probably everybody of you, already once made a trial account, or maybe even just recently, and you might be thinking, okay, how does the crew side of things work inside Rentman? I organized this little webinar to make sure that you get a good understanding of it. I myself also created just a trial account, just like you did, that is focused only on the crew scheduling side of things. Now, if you have any questions in between, or maybe at the end, feel free to use the Q&A function of this webinar. My guest host, Silka, is also part of this webinar. We'll be very happy to answer all of your questions in between, at the end, whenever you feel like you need to ask something. And yeah, we can also take the time at the end to make sure all questions get answered. I will just begin right away. I already have it open, my Rentman profile. Now, as you can see, I'm starting in the dashboard. The dashboard gives you a very quick and easy overview of what's going on at the moment. You can see, for example, I have some tasks where the deadline, for example, already expired 9 days ago in this case. And then other tasks where I still have some time. I could now go into it or maybe check them already if they're done. Can open all of my tasks. I have here my schedule, which what I have to do today. So I've been planned as a sound technician, for example, in London. And what is going on tomorrow? Pretty much the same. I can edit this dashboard, add some more widgets to it, for example, some more financial information. If I'm, for example, the administrator of this whole Rentman profile, I see down here my invitations, time registration that I registered, and so on. Now on the top right, I see my profile. Everybody that will make use of your Rentman profile will have their own user login, and I can, for example, make some small changes to my account. But I can also see, for example, what is new. And just recently, what inspired me to do this webinar, we had a lot of nice improvements for our crew planner. As you can see here, you can read all about it, and more importantly, you can give your feedback to it, which is always very much appreciated. These updates would never interrupt you. It's a browser application, it's cloud-based, so you would just be happily notified, okay, there's some kind of new update coming into Rentman. Of course, we have always all kinds of notifications available. So let's just say you're working on a project or you're invited to something. Maybe you send out a quotation and still don't know, hey, has it been accepted, yes or no? You will always stay up to date with notifications, not just here in the browser application, but also on your phone, for example. You have the opportunity to download the Rentman app free on the Play Store and App Store, can activate push notifications and make sure you never miss anything. Then we feel a help center. If you're ever wondering how something works and you want to try it on your own, we have a very, very great support center where you will find all kinds of instructions. But we also have great and free support, which Silka, my co-host, is part of. And I can always make sure to ask all of your questions, whatever you might be. Now let's go more into the specifics. As you saw, this is the dashboard. Now, what else do we have? Is of course very important that everybody gets their own login. Now for that, we have here the crew member tab. And as you can see, now this is my whole crew. Now everybody can be found here. And then we also have a folder structure. I have, for example, my own crew. Then I might work with freelancers. And as you can see, also some hiring companies, just in case I don't really have someone ready to be working with me, then I could ask a hiring company if they can give me someone available. And they all have certain licenses, specialties. Maybe some of them have a driving license and so on. And I can completely customize this view as well. If I want to add some more crew members to make sure, okay, someone else can also log in into my profile, I can just add a crew member here, create an account with a username and email, and they can immediately be part of it. I just assign them a certain user role, which will define what kind of user they will be, but also what they will be able to see and do inside the Rentman profile. Right? For example, I'm a power user, which indicates I am an administrator and I can pretty much plan crew, create projects, and so on. But as you can see, some of them, or actually most of them, are really just freelancers who I will then eventually invite or just immediately plan for any kind of project I might have. But not just the crew members, you also might be in need of vehicles. Your vehicles you can of course also set up in here with a folder structure, name, inspection dates, registration number, and much more information behind it. Again, you have the option to always completely customize this overview. You can just move stuff around. I can edit the columns to add some more information in this overview. And what you can always do inside Rentman as well is either import and of course also the option to export. Never a problem. What else we have is we have task. So in any kind of project, any kind of situation, you might want to create some task for your crew members. You want to make sure they do something and everybody knows what they're supposed to do. I, for example, see here all the tasks that have been appointed to me, but also to the other crew members, and work on them and so on. I can mark them as complete if I already did them, and I will also, of course, find them inside the projects. With time registration, now, of course, whenever you plan someone for a project, you want to make sure that they also register the time. It will not just affect how long they work, but also the costs inside the project. More to that in a bit. As you can see here, we have here a very big time registration history from the 1st of August until the 28th of September. How long have they been working, the distance that they traveled, the travel time itself, the duration that they worked, the break that they might have took. This can be, of course, be edited manually. Can be registered in two ways, either manually as well, or also with time step, for example, again on the Rentman app. Now we also have statistics where you can create all kinds of overview regarding your crew, for example, the revenue based on what kind of project they were working for, how long they have been working, and much more. Now let's get a little bit back to the interesting aspect is my schedule, for example. Now what you see here basically is your calendar overview that maybe someone that you invited to be a crew member of your Rentman profile could see. I can see, for example, I've been invited. I have two open invitations here. First, I've been invited to update my availability status. And next, I've been invited to be part of a project, which is this one as a technician. And for both, I cannot say, hey, I'm available, yes or no. And I can also answer, for example, for Marc. I could, for example, say, hey, this works great for me. And then therefore, for example, accept the invitation. And then therefore, of course, the status will be immediately updated. And the person, whoever is planning this, will be notified as well. Now, what I can also do is, really greatly, I can proactively let whoever is in charge of managing the crew know when I'm available and when I'm not. I can, for example, just select some days here. And now either, for example, put an appointment in here or update my availability. And that's, for example, comes very much in handy when you're working with freelancers, and those freelancers might not be available for you at all times. So what they can proactively do, set the availability. For example, I can say, hey, I'm not available for whatever reason, leave a remark here, click on save. Now you can see I will show up as red. That will be very, very beneficial and helpful later on when we're planning the crew, because I, as the freelancer, will show up in red because either I'm unavailable or maybe I'm already planned for a function. Of course, I can do the same thing next week, for example, and put myself as available, and then again, leave a remark. Click on save, also have the remark visible here. And then, of course, I will show up as green and might be preferred over somebody who either didn't put his availability or, of course, might not be available at all. You can see here my appointments, the projects that I'm invited to. Here's a project, for example. I see here I have an appointment to visit a trade show, for example. Or if I click here on the technician, which is a function that I am planned for, I can see this project here. From when to when is it going? Who's behind it? Who's the client? Where do I have to go? Is there maybe a possible project leader? And of course, the other people that are also working on this project, very important to stay in touch with them as well. Maybe I have some kind of question, maybe I need to know something, then therefore I always have the opportunity to get in touch with them as well. From here on, I can also leave notes. If, for example, I want to let someone know that I might be late to the location, just add a note here and say, hey, I will be late or something like that. Leave some more notes, and then the people, everybody else will be notified as well. I can also find all files here that are created within or added to a project, what vehicles will be used, and so on, or just immediately jump into the project as well, of course. Now, this is not the only thing. As I mentioned, appointments, planning can be updated here, but you can also synchronize this calendar with your own. You have many options here. You can synchronize, for example, with Google Calendar, Outlook, or maybe with a standard calendar that iOS or any kind of other device might provide. Now, what else we have is, of course, the project overview. As I have it set up right now is I set a certain filter, which will only show me the projects for next week and projects where crew is still required. As you can see, if I now just select any kind of project, it will immediately give me some details. I have a project status, and more importantly, I have here the project progress. It will immediately show me what the progress is like inside the project. For example, here with little icons that indicate, in this case, that the project has been confirmed, which we can see here also with the status, but not all functions are fully planned. That indicates that some of the crew functions are not fully planned. Then we have another project here. There's still not much done. So let's just jump into this one. We see this one here is, for example, a production. We have here a project type, which will also indicate, for example, which default documents should be sent out inside this project. It can all be set up in the configurations, of course, and some more information. This project is still in status concept. Now, whenever we at one point maybe send out a quotation, it will automatically change to pending. And when that quotation will be digitally designed by your customer, it will change to confirmed. Or of course, you also have the option to manually change this if you wanted to. You have an internal project number, maybe an external reference. In this case, my client is Wow Music, as you can see. I already put them in here. So the external reference could be, for example, Wow Music -123, whatever you arrange with your customer. You can see here that this client is in London. I have a contact person, so who made the order. And then I can see, for example, here even has a warning text. So I should be very careful with my invoices. Then where is everything going to be happening? I can see it will be in London as well, but a different address. And also then a different contact person at the location as well. You can see here the distance and the travel time to the location from my own office, for example, or wherever people are starting to work from. Now that it will be very beneficial later on whenever we're planning the travel time, travel distance, and so on. Down here, we now have the option to add some tasks for everybody you're inviting to, leave notes or add files, for example, the planning of the location, some images, or whatever else might be needed. On the right side, we see the progress, as mentioned before. We see here the project period, because if we go a little bit further, we have here already set up, because I did so, the time schedule, and then I have, for example, here 2 time periods. Now this could be a lot more detailed and specific. In this case, I have it very easily set up. I have it set up at location and then the transport back and forth, but we will see inside another project that this can go way more detailed. Now we have here the crew and transport side of things. As you can see, I already have some edit. We have here on the left side some, excuse me, we have here on the left side some default functions. Those are not the crew members itself. Those are just default functions that you might need, for example, for crew and transport. For example, we might need a driver. Now, if I just click on edit the driver, we can, for example, see it has an external name, internal name, of course, for yourself. Whenever you need a driver, you know, okay, this one, for example, is being paid on an hourly rate. An external name will then be on the customer documents. We can see from when to when they usually work, how many hours, what are being paid, what do they cost you. You can put in here the travel time already. And then very, very important is the remarks. Now I already added this function. And of course, also we have a default function for transport, which will then show, for example, the price per kilometer, per mile, wherever you locate it, or maybe a fixed rate, which could be, for example, a daily rate, however you're going to pay it, the distance, and so on. But you can also edit it later on, because we're on the right side. We have the function groups already, which I took over from my time schedule. And then you can, for example, see here, we have the driver function that I already added over. You can just click on here, click on add, and then I added it here to my transport, back and forth. We see here the driver, can click on edit. And now we can make some changes to it. And also really important is we can, for example, put a customer remark. Customer remark will, for example, show on the documents of the customer, such as the quotation invoice, where we can say, for example, we will choose the best possible driver for you. Just as an example, then remark for the planner would be then on the crew planner, where you will have a complete overview of all crew members and can add them on top of these default functions. And then, for example, whoever's planning the crew, I can let them know, like, hey, choose the best driver, important client, for example. And then the crew member remark, that will be the remark that the crew member will be invited or planned for this function will see. For example, watch out for following then add some information here. So he will be immediately notified of something. On save. Now, whenever we feel like, okay, this is all good, we see here, for example, I set up a location, I have a stagehand, light technician, sound technician, I feel the quantity, how many people do I need from when to when, and so on. I feel like, hey, this all seems brand out good, and I can continue with my project. I have, for example, additional costs that I could still add. And then at one point I have the financial overview, but maybe before I add any quotation or invoice, I can, of course, already plan my crew members on top of the functions. I can either go to my crew planner and search for this project, or I can open the crew planner from within the project, and then it will immediately filter down to the project. But luckily, I already have the crew planner open here on the top left. Now, what we see here is all projects from the 20 until the 30th of September. I set certain filters to only show me the projects that I feel like I need to see. Let's put this a little bit bigger. You can see here all of the projects. Now let's go to the project that we were working with, which was here our production. Now we can see here the functions that we just talked about, and we can see that they're all still in red and that there's nothing planned yet. Now let's open this project up a little bit. What we might want to do is, for example, click on a stagehand. And what you might notice is on the left side of things is our crew members will all show up in either red, green, or some even in blank. Nothing really happened there yet. Now for the stagehand, I might need someone from my own crew or a freelancer, or maybe a very specific person. Now what you also have is you have tags. You can, for example, click here on tags, and then you can choose any of these tags to search for a very specific person, maybe someone with a driving license, maybe someone with a very special license, or maybe someone that's just specialized in something. In this case, for example, I decide someone that is specialized in something, which could be, for example, the stagehand kind of function. Now I select it, and I can see, for example, here now James and John, who could technically take over this job. And I can select them both, or just select the whole thing. And then down here, I see, for example, okay, John is technically free. James also, but he's already invited. You can also push this up a little bit if we want to. He's already planned for a project, which is this one, as you can see, also at the same location. Now, what we could do is we could invite them both. For example, if I click here on invite, I can invite them to the stagehand. Now, there's different ways to invite people. You can, for example, request availability. So in this case, we just asked them to update the availability status in their schedule in this time period of the function. Or we have the option to directly visibly plan somebody or invisibly plan them. Now, if I would visibly plan them, one person could, for example, James could accept it first, and then whenever John will then try to accept this invitation, it will be invalid, and the invitation will not be valid anymore because James already took it. Now, if I would decide to invite them invisibly, that would mean both could technically accept the invitation, but then I, as the person who's actually planning the crew, can decide, do I take James or John for this function? Because maybe James is more reliable than John, or I just prefer to take James in this case. So the option is then mine, which gives me some more flexibility. I can set a due date, so maybe I need to know in advance when they will be available, or if they can take the function. You can see here where I'm actually inviting, can add some more people to it, or delete somebody, or I think it's all good to go. I can attach a message to it, or choose a template, which might make your life easier. The project information they will receive anyway. This could be any kind of message that they might need to know. I can click on invite. What you now might notice right away, I see here is I have here James and John both in the invitations. If I go with the mouse to the stagehand, you might notice that James and John will immediately show up in yellow because they are now invited. And you can also see John now shows up here in yellow. So everybody will immediately know, okay, John is at this moment being invited to something which he has not yet accepted. Now let's continue our path. We see here the light condition, for example. Again, same thing. What we can do is, for example, click here on a text and search, for example, only for the light technician. You can see, for example, all of these people show up in red. Maybe this overview is not big enough. What you can also do is you can also select to open this in a new tab. So you can have, for example, all of your crew members maybe open on your second screen, or maybe you put these two browser tabs next to each other and have a way bigger overview of all of your crew members. And then we see, for example, Jerry would not be available because he's already planned for technician. But maybe I can ask Brian or Tom to take over. I can see, for example, Tom will technically be available. So what I can also do is I can just take this function and move it over to Tom. So now Tom will take it over, and then therefore Jerry will be free for me to take over. Now let's go back. We are currently at the light technician, and let's go and maybe ask John to take over. See here, John, for example, we could invite him to this function, or some other people. I see, for example, also George will be available. Now, what I can also do is I can here decide to concept plan. So I can already kind of put some people in the planning, but not really define it yet, or not really make it directly visible as you saw before. So let me put George, Marc, and Ben in here. Click on add. And now, as you might see, now they show up in a certain way, which shows me, okay, they are not fully planned yet, but they are more or less in my concept planning, where I can still decide, okay, who will I actually want to take? And if I feel like I have a good feeling with all of them, I can also select them, for example. And if I really want to put them in the planning, I can switch to visibility. And then therefore, as you can see now, they are fully planned. They show up in dark blue. This function now is green. 3 out of 3 people have been added. Now this is fully planned. So this would be the next step, not inviting them, but adding them to the project already, depending, of course, on how you work. If now, for example, also either James or John accept the stagehand function, they will then, of course, move up to the planning as well. Now, of course, we still need a driver. Now we see Marc, for example, would be available. I will add him as a driver. And now we still need sound technicians. And let's see if we have one. Now this doesn't look too promising. If we open up here the availability, we see down here, they all pretty much very busy. No one will be available. What we can also then do is ask a hiring company, which might have some people available, because you can also set up a hiring company instead of one of your crew members, which then also have their email, and you could ask them, hey, do you have 2 sound technicians available? And therefore you can of course plan them, can plan multiple at the same time, because the hiring company might have 3 technicians or 5 technicians available for you at the same time. So for my sound technician, I will add now 2 times the hiring company, which then will also receive this information. Now, we still have the invitations open, but we already planned some people. What we can now continue to do is already send out the planning for what we have right now. Before I forget though, we still have an open transport here. Now here on the left side with the crew members. Now let's go to the vehicles. You can see here also, of course, the availability of my vehicles. You can see most of them are pretty caught up. I could technically take truck 2. So let's add truck 2 to my driving. And now we can continue on sending the planning. What you see here now is all projects in the time period of the 20 until the 30th of September. And you can, for example, if you have not yet sent out the planning, send the planning for any of those, you can, for example, go into this one, see what I would actually send out to my crew members, or I can just, of course, keep it with the production that we've currently worked for. If I click on preview, I see immediately, okay, what am I inviting them for what function, from when to when? Does it all make sense? Can I click on send? Can add an email to it, or you can use a template and then go for it. Now, don't be worried. I will now receive some notifications that these emails can, of course, not be sent out because these people don't actually exist and their emails are not correct. Now, this is a way to plan a project, but of course, sometimes you need to make changes to it because things can change. Now, if you, for example, go up, or maybe also let's just go into one of the projects. We see, for example, here the Soul Train tour still needs some work. We can jump into it. Now this is a Soul Train, this is a whole tour. What you can also do is you can, for example, create a main project and group your main projects into multiple sub-projects. which can look like this. And if we, for example, go into the Helsinki one, that will then happen in Helsinki. For example, you can set up multiple locations. We get down here, we see, for example, a very more bright time schedule with some more tasks to be done. If we go to crew transport, we see what is here, what kind of functions we would need. And as I mentioned before, you can open now the crew planner from here, see what still needs to be done, for example. And if we now open it up, we see, for example, yep, still a lot of functions that need to be planned, and someone already reserved or invited. Now, what we can do here is we see the technician, see these two would be fitting. Now, if we add them, what we can do is here also, for example, the technician and the sound technician, we can take them both, and then, for example, just move them around. So we'll make it longer, but the function actually needs to happen longer. So you can see it's very flexible. Now, because we put the function for as technician longer, Ben will not be available anymore because it now overtakes with one of the functions already planned for. So Ben shows up in red and I would need to replace him. Now I could just take him out, for example, delete him and put somebody else in. Or as I mentioned before, what you can also do is just again, select all of your crew members, open the availability window in a new tab, and have the option to make changes to it. For example, I see that Ben is now here, the light technician. I can just move it over to somebody who's better available. Here, the light technician, move it over there. And then for Ben, for example, because now I know he's available, I can just take some of the days here and mark him as available, as unavailable, maybe reserve him because I want to take Ben for myself and this time period, invite him to a project, make an appointment for him, but I will mark him as reserved because I need him. Hit him for my production, for example, select, and now he will be as reserved. Now, as you can see, you can also here mark people as available and unavailable, will immediately change, or they can do it from their side as well. Go back to the project, and then I could continue to make changes to it. Now, as soon as you have a lot of people added, you might also want to define a project leader. What you can do is you can, for example, click here myself and click on edit. And I can, for example, mark here myself as the project leader. So everybody will know immediately when they're working on a project, who to talk to, who they can ask questions to. I can also, for each crew member, select their crew member rate. So on what basis will they be paid? For example, on what kind of specialties they have, on what kind of functions they are planned in this case. Maybe they have different kind of crew member rates they're being paid on. How will the travel time be calculated? I can, for example, say here's a round trip, so basically back and forth. I can add here remarks to it, click on save. Now I show up here as the project leader and so on. That would be pretty much it. Let's go back to our project that we were already working on. Now, the financial aspects, of course, also really interesting. We have, in this case, different kind of costs to consider. We have the estimated costs, which is based on the functions you added in crew transport. Then we have planned costs, which is then based on the chosen rate. So as you saw before, I chose a rate for some of my crew members and then how long they actually planned. And then you have the actual cost, which is then based on the chosen rate as before, but also then the registered hours. Because as I showed you before, you have the option to register your hours, which most of the time will happen from their phone or any kind of device that they might be taking with them, where they can use the Rentman app to register the time, either manually or with time stop. Just to give you an example, we have here the Rentman app. I did not make a video of it. It is because Zoom sometimes makes videos a little bit laggy. So I prefer to show you a little bit of screenshots from my Rentman app. We can see, for example, here. Let me just make it a little bit bigger. We see here, for example, my schedule, which you also saw on the browser application. I've been invited to some function which run in yellow. I have some days available, which I did myself, and some days are unavailable. I see all the projects that I'm planned for. I see here on the left side the menu. I see I have invitations and notifications for invitations, maybe a notification because a project note has been added, and I can go into all the projects, put in my time in the registration, have an overview of the contacts. I can also, of course, here add more to it, add my availability, create appointments, and so on. Just some more examples. You, of course, have projects, insights, time registration, You have here, for example, inside the project, you can just contact the other crew members, for example, via text message, WhatsApp, or call them, or send them an email. And here an example as from a push notification I received when I've been invited as a technician, which will be very helpful to make sure, okay, everybody gets to accept the invitations and will definitely be notified, not just via email, but also via the Rentman app, where they can activate the push notifications to never miss an invitation. Right, afterwards, I can add a quotation, send to my customer, for example, add invoices, all part of Rentman. If we ever feel like we maybe missed something, we also here at the end, for example, see the crew scheduling side of things, and maybe we made some mistakes, maybe something's missing. We can see, for example, this one's still incomplete. Here, this is not visibly planned yet, so I still have to decide, do I actually want to take Marc, yes or no? I can see here, I already have him in here, so he will show up as red because he was been overbooked. But this one, for example, is fully planned, so all good. Transport planning also seems fine. We also of course, have a history log, so which crew member did what changes to a project, if they are even allowed to make changes to a project, which is of course very helpful. Here you can, for example, see that I did the whole crew planning side of things, which is very important. But this is pretty much it. I kind of showed you all kinds of changes and additions you can make to your crew planner. And of course, we also have the CRM side of things inside Rentman. You have a complete contact list for your customers, not just the customers, locations, suppliers. You have everything in here that you might need, as well as the crew member, vehicles, task, time registration, and the statistics, messages you send out. Of course, you have the option to always send out emails from within Rentman. And Rentman in itself is also flexible. If we go into, for example, the configuration side of things, we have here, for example, extra input fields. Now, in my time registration, I thought it might be important to also have the option to add hotel stay per night, which will be in this case a price field, and then also the name of the hotel, which will be text field. So if we now go into time registration, click on add time registration, we now down here have, which I added, and it's not usually in Rentman, the hotel stay per night, where I can add a price, for example, and then add here the name of the hotel. So when I then register the time, whoever is then responsible for the finance, for example, will also see, okay, I also have to consider that this crew member then paid 100 euros per night. Also, of course, add here the number of days I would stay, but again, would also be in here. When it comes to the time registration, you can register the worked hours, holidays, corrections, so whenever you need to correct something, sick leave, compensation, and so on. You can see here, for example, in this case, it would be for the sub technician, which I've been invited to, can type in here how many hours I worked, or just type it in here, add another function if I needed to. And then again, as I mentioned before, with here the statistics, you can, for example, create a statistics if we ever wonder how well it's going, for example, for our crew, have some insights into the cost and so on. And it could be, for example, in here, how many times have I planned them, the planned hours, the actual registered hours, the revenue behind each of the crew member, and then therefore also the profit. Then of course we have to have the financial information of each of the projects, invoices that we possibly send out, and so on. But this is pretty much all I usually present from the crew scheduling side of things. Of course, anything can be customized, as I mentioned before. There's also different overviews for this, for example. I can just change the columns, or this is not the only project overview. We also have, for example, the list, daily overview, calendar, but also, for example, timeline, where it will then group by the project type, for example, account manager, client, location. So as you can see, you can set up your Rentman as you wish, make it your own, and make sure to stay on top of things. This was pretty much it. Feel free to ask all of your questions in the Q&A function of this webinar. I hope to see some questions. If I don't, I assume everything has been answered for you, but that is hopefully not the case. So feel free to go ahead and ask your questions. You can see someone already asked a question, which has been answered by my colleague Silke. also for you, very important to know, at the end of this webinar, there will be 3 questions for you to answer. It will be anonymous, but of course you can also leave your contact details in a comment. I will be very, very happy if you could just answer 3 of the questions. Very simple, can just select the answer for you, and it will help us maybe improve our crew scheduling side of things inside Rentman. As you saw before, there's always stuff happening. We have improvements, we have frequent updates, but we always are happy to receive any kind of feedback to make our crew planner more efficient than it could ever be. You can see more questions coming in. Can this data, I have a question here, can this data be pushed to an accounting software for payroll? We already have official integrations inside Rentman. If you see, for example, here, this is our integration overview. And for example, we can see here we have the QuickBooks side of things and others, Xero as well. But if you feel like, for example, any kind of integration with your accounting software might be missing, you also have the option to create a connection through our public API, where all kinds of connections to your accounting software could be created. Not just the crew side of things, but also financial information. Something that might be interesting as well as Root Titan, which is one of our latest and official integrations. You can, for example, here plan your transports or your drives more efficient, also with live GPS tracking. So just one example of the nice integrations that Rentman has. Feel free to now ask more questions. Of course, you will also receive the recording of this, which I will make sure to make available to everybody who maybe couldn't join, or maybe you want to review everything to try it all on your account side of things, which is no problem at all. I can also only really recommend our support center, as I mentioned. As emails are delivered, you can see, for example, here, if you click on the help center, here's the support center. And there with all kinds of instructions and tutorials and overviews. Here, for example, for the crew and transport side of things, you can find all kinds of overviews, especially, for example, if you're interested how does the time registration works, then you have here all kinds of instructions and how to set it up, how it works, what you can actually do with it, and so on. And if you ever need anything else, you have the search bar, just search for what you need and give it all a try. But we'll, of course, are happy to help as well. All right, I don't think there are more questions coming in. If you do, then feel free to ask them. We will send you a recording of it. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact our free support via chat, email, telephone. Everything is available to you. Thank you very much for everyone who joined. And until the next time.